Hello, I just read chapter, what was it? 11 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight, and we're picking back up with my two favourite characters in the book, Zender and I-5. Um, I can very easily just summarise this chapter. Basically, they've arrived in the Yam sector, and the first thing that happens is a slice monger comes up to them, tries to offer some death sticks and stuff, and I5 scares him away with a blaster bolt from his finger, a laser beam, um, and he runs off, and then they start making their way to a turbo lift, and Den's really not wanting to go down there it's it's a because they're in the Black Pit slums, the Yam sector. It's not a very good place to be, and he's tried to stop I5 from going, but of course he can't stop I5. He's dead set on his mission, and he gets into the turbo lift and goes down. And then Den gets a little bit alarmed because he sees a gang member, what he assumes is a gang member, in the corner of his eye, but luckily he doesn't look to be coming towards him, and he makes his way back down to the street. And something I forgot to mention, when the Slife did come, it was a dog, and I5 suggested it might have had a disease Celestans can catch, and Dender is a Celestans. Luckily for him, though, he doesn't seem to have caught it. Anyway, then he goes down to the street and he's just completely lost where I5 is. And then I5 pulls him into an alleyway, and they have a bit more banter, which is, again, because it's dead in I5, it's good banter to just read. And we're told a little bit about I5's past, about how he was bought from a rich family by Lorne Pavan, and how uh how the kids in the family would order the droids to walk off roofs and see who would oh, wasn't it fall the furthest? Which one would end up as scrap metal. And of course he was bought by Lorne Pavan, and on Coruscant, Lorne and I5 would deal in the black and grey markets, um, and help with that. Eventually they came into the possession of a Nemoidian holocron, and it's a dark, shadowy figure from that was sent by some place in a high position, was sent after them and killed Lorne Pavan. And considering that um, Kaird of the Nedigi of the Nedigi is in this, and how we were told he was an assassin in Black Sun at one point. It wouldn't surprise me if it was Kaird that killed Lorne Pavan. I'm gonna say I'm willing to bet it is Kaird, because it says no way that they've introduced a assassin in the main role, and it can't be, and it's not gonna be Kaird. I have a feeling it's gonna be Kaird. Um, Otherwise, like, why bring in a former assassin? And the timeline lines up as well. I think so. Yeah, it's gonna be really. I'm really looking forward to see if it is Kaird. I think it is. Like, it's like, well, who else would it be? But yeah. Um, and from what we're told, and I5 never really went much into the details of what happened once the assassin was sent, but Zender, being a reporter, did some digging, was able to do some digging on the HoloNet and from things that I5 had let slip through in conversation, it was quite a nasty murder, assassination. And while they're in the alleyway, a Botham comes along and hands I5 a little device. He asks for the payment, and I5 says it's already in his account. And the Boffin continues on, and Ender was a bit startled by the Boffin, was a little bit afraid because of stuff he's heard of Boffins, about how they can assess more possible situations, so basically even a computer. And he looks at I5 and says, "What do you mean the credits are already in his account?" And I5 explains that that's why they're... It was an arrangement made months ago. The funds were in escrow for this purpose only. And then asks, of course, what the device does. And I5 explains that it's going to help them find Jax Pavan the next best way, which is being able to try and sense whenever he uses the Force. Because apparently, when you use the Force, it exhibits unique brainwaves, and the device can detect that. And but I5 says it has its limits, and when Den asks what those limits are, because now they're walking down the street. I assume once it was handed, they started walking down the street, because it's only explained once we get to this point in the conversation that they're in the street now. But I5 then says that they can only track how far Jax is if Jax is in where Jax is if he uses the Force within 20 meters of them. At that point, Den just breaks down in laughter out of annoyance. He winds up getting cross-legged on the street, and some people think he's homeless and drop some credits for him. It's never explained if he takes them. But once he's able to pull himself back together, he gets up, asks for I5 to hand him the little device, well, the data chip. That's what it's described as. It's I5 hands it over rather quietly, which is quite out of character for him. And then Zen drops it and steps on it and says that, okay, is it enough of this? They're going to find Jax his way. And that's where we end the chapter. There was some nice banter when I5 did find Den, which I want to read out. If I can find it, I think I've gone a bit too far back. There we go. Miss me? The droid asked. Give me a blaster and I won't next time. What? We're waiting for someone. Anyone in particular, or are we just lonely? I am. I5 muttered, just loud enough for Den to hear. The reporter grinned. He wasn't sure what peculiar combination of circuitry had resulted in the acerbic side of I5's personality, but it never ceased to amaze him. Be nice to me, he warned the droid. Who's your master? I5 gave him a look that made Den thankful the droid's lasers were in his fingers instead of his photoreceptors. A teasing reminder of I5's supposed property status was always sure to get a rise out of him. Lorne Pavan had considered him an equal, not a piece of equipment that could talk. And then we go into like the backstory of I5. But yeah, they have some really good banter in the book. They're really fun to read just because of the chatting. So my thoughts on this chapter, well, again, it's down to I5. Of course, the banter's going to be good. So it's again, they're the best characters in the book so far, and definitely the most developed characters. You actually know who they are personality-wise. Everyone else, we kind of know what they're about, but we don't really know a lot about who they are, personality-wise. With Den and I5, though, we know that. I only really know, what Nick's personality is because of reading Shadows and Mindor, so I think that just kind of taints my view on Nick in this book. Although I will say I have been struggling to see Nick's personality, but Den and I5, they've got a really good dynamic, which I really think does kind of show their personalities in a really good way. And again, they're some of the few characters in the book that I can quite firmly say, they've got a personality at the moment. The other ones just kind of feel like they've got a backstory, but we're still waiting for the personality to shine through. It's sort of getting that last chapter with Jax and Nick, you know, it's last where Jax wasn't too bothered by the still alive seafood, and Nick was, and then he tried to, that's not bad. But you know, it's Zane and I5 have been popping a lot more than the other characters, and Jax and everyone else not quite so much. Hopefully they do start popping out a bit more though. It's I think it has just been we've been more focused on establishing the backstories of these characters rather than establishing who these characters are. And I think that's something that maybe Last of the Jedi did a lot better, where we were told about the backstories, you know, although in a way, you know, those books come off Jedi Quest. So you're meant to know everything from Jedi Quest and Jedi Apprentice, but you don't have to know. And any information you need to know that going into that book, the book tells you. The books tell you. And, you know, you generally get an idea of who the characters are, you know, when they're introduced. You know, Trevor is a moody young teenager. Ferris, you know, in his first chapter in Desperate Mission, you know, you very quickly learn who he is, what he's about, who he's like, just from his personality. Same with Donor Telemark in that chapter. Um, you know, you very quickly pick up who these characters are in Last of the Jedi. Here, it's taking quite a bit longer to just tell us who are they as people. I think that's been my main problem with the book. I think that's one of my main problems with the book so far. But I am glad that, you know, Din and I5, we know who they are as people. You know, they're not deeply, but we do know. And they're great fun to read. It's going to be interesting to see what Den's way of finding Jax is going to be. You know, it's about, how's they going to find him? But yeah, and again, the banter is just good. It's nice to learn a bit more about I5's backstory, and I'm glad it wasn't it dragged on for 4 pages like a lot of the other ones have been. I'm glad they just didn't drag it on and on and on, because that has happened quite a bit with some of these chapters, with most of the chapters that introduce us to characters in this book. They just drag on and on and on. So I am glad that did not happen here. I'm glad it was just kept for about half a page. That's all we needed. That's all it gave us. That's all we needed. We didn't need any more, and that was it. That was all we needed to know. That was how the exposition should have been done for all the other characters. Again, I think the book's starting to pick up a lot of speed now that we're not focusing on trying to tell us the backstories of these characters. So it's really starting to pick up a lot of speed now, and generally the book's getting more enjoyable. And I do quite like that, you know, the backstory just didn't drag out. You know, it didn't need to drag out, and it didn't drag out. And that's what made this chapter really good. It didn't spend more time than it needed to on the backstory. It definitely could have spent more time if it wanted to. It definitely would have made the chapter a lot worse, because we could have just gone into all the details. But it didn't. It gave us all the information we needed to know, and that was it. And that's just what we needed. You know, we didn't need to keep dragging it on and on and on. So yeah, I'm very happy that it just didn't drag on this time, especially when, you know, we're in the middle of a plot. We don't need a chapter 4 situation where when Jax is looking over a balcony, looking over to escape, looking over the edge of a bridge, looking for an escape route. That's when we get the backstory, rather than us getting the backstory when he's running through the streets getting back home. You know, that would have been a better place to put that exposition, because that's going to be a long journey. That's the perfect time to give us the exposition and for it to not feel out of place. Not when he's in a desperate situation trying to escape, you know. So I'm glad that even though this did kind of come in the middle of the plot of this chapter, it was kept short and concise, and it was able to relate back to the banter. We it's it, we it relates back to the banter in the way of we're told that he was treated as equal by Lorne Pavan. Not that he isn't treated as equal by Den, but I think you can kind of tell because he does because Den does still see I5 as his friend, but it does seem to remind him a little bit more that he has got a master. So yeah. Um, yeah, I did really enjoy this chapter. I think again there were a lot of good moments because again it's Den and I5. Of course, there's going to be good moments. Um, I5 as well. It just continues to be great. It just continues to be great. With his laser fingers. It seems to be. It really does feel like a lot of situations. He just points his laser fingers, goes pew with them, and sorts them out. But then again, they can be quite in a way dangerous situations or situations that you don't really want to get involved in, and he just sorts it out that way. So yeah, but yeah, in general, I really enjoy the chapter. I know I keep saying that, but I did. Um, and it's going to be interesting to see what Kaird is up to next chapter, because I did look to see what character was going to be in the next chapter, and it looks like we're getting back to Kaird of the Nejedi, of the Nediji. I don't know how you pronounce that, but I think it is Nediji. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if we learn more about Kaird. Something I do want to know is if Kaird is the assassin that killed Lorne Pavan, because it's never clarified as to what the higher position is. So it definitely could be Black Sun. Yeah, it is Black Sun he's in, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, he's the one in Black Sun. Wasn't sure if I was mixing up with Tyke then, but no, Tyke's the one with Vader. He's Vader's assistant, so yeah. It's going to be interesting to see if we get any confirmation. I don't think we would at this point in the book. I'm 12 chapters in. I've still got another 31 chapters to go. Which well, that's almost a quarter of the way through the book, but it's still this is the first book of a series as well, so well, of a trilogy. So it wouldn't surprise me if we just don't get any confirmation on whether Kaird did kill Lorne Pavan yet. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I feel like, considering we're going straight to Kaird after getting that reveal that an assassin killed Lorne Pavan, and while having an assassin in this book, I think that kind of says quite a bit about maybe we have got a assassin in maybe we've got an assassin in sorry, my mind just went blank for a moment. Maybe Kaird is the assassin that killed Pavan. Anyway, I'm going to end this here because I'm rambling on. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello, so I've just read chapter 12 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight. There's really not a whole lot to talk about this chapter, and it actually was one that drags on again. It was inevitably going to happen though. Basically, Kaird has got a hyper gem which apparently kind of transcends three dimensions. And he's brought over to someone called, I think, Endrigorn, and they make a deal, and they eventually make a deal, and he's also Kaird's in a skin suit, so it looks like a basilisk, just so he isn't caught out, just so he doesn't get caught and you know get caught in what he's doing, and and Jagor might turn over who it really is. So he got into a skin suit, and he's able to eventually, after some back and forth with Jagor, and sell him the gem. And we learn it's because she's always occasionally has a habit of sometimes, not all the time, just sometimes looking at a hyper gem, because the effects of a hyper gem is because it transcends three dimensions. Um, for the species that can't comprehend it, they go insane, and the species that can are usually just entwined in its beauty and just look at it and can even starve to death just being entangled in how beautiful it is. And Prince Shizel will occasionally test his willpower on a hypergem and see whether he can, you know, break himself free um from that wonder of beauty. However, the specific hypergem is from Meta is from someone else over on the planet called Metalopis or whatever, or Metolis, and Kaird had paid good money to have it stolen, and so his plan is to get the people over on at Metapolis to get involved with Black Sun, and of course have it seem like Prince Shizel's stolen the gem. So he's trying to set up a conflict. What was the yeah, it would start a conflict with Black Sun. And then we cut over to Jack's Pavan. I was just thinking, and this is kind of where the chapter just drags on. But and it's just something where you don't need to keep it going on and on and on like this. You can just shorten it and get the point across in a much more direct way. But he's basically just thinking over, the Jedi's view of death and whether it would be better to just, go now. Um, and we told that Evan Peel had told Nick Ross to, and he passed it on to Jax that Vader was looking for him. Everyone's just looking for Jax. Um, and of course, there's a couple of things I brought up as well. And he now feels like he has a purpose trying to complete Peel's quest. I really do not have a whole lot to say on this chapter, I'm sorry. The Jax Pavan bits just went on and on. Again, that's been my big problem with the book. It's just been really slow. It's gone straight back to that. When it gets some it's some chapters they have a little bit of speed going on, and then it gets killed by stuff like this. Again, it's good to get into the eyes of the characters. It just goes on, and there's a much quicker way to just do it. Just tell us directly how they feel. And I don't really think it helps that quite a few times throughout this chapter, at least for me, I was really struggling to understand what it was going on about. And some of the things are really oddly phrased, and I was struggling to understand again what was being said. At one point it was going on about Jax's parents, and then it started talking about how he never really felt he was lacking anything because he was in the temple, but the way it was phrased, it made it seem like he was still talking about the parents and how it felt like maybe Jax had, and how to Jax he felt maybe like, he was lacking something for being in his parents were lacking something, or something like that. It was so confused. This chapter was really a tough one to read, I'll be honest. Yeah, I didn't really enjoy this chapter a great amount. The Caird bits was probably the best bit of it. But yeah, there were some good bits with Jax. Don't get me wrong. It's just again just went on and on and on, and you don't need to extend it on for so many pages. You can just shorten it, and it'll still make sense and be a lot more tolerable. And for that's the best way I can put it. A bit more tolerable. Just because it just goes sometimes it just goes a bit on and on and on. Sometimes it just goes a bit on and on and on. And you don't need to keep it going like that. You can just get to the point, and that's would probably just, in my opinion, improve the book. But yeah, I did enjoy the chapter. There was another thing brought up about, Jax's name, about why he didn't change it, and this is where we're told that there are millions of beings with his name. They haven't gotten the precise number yet. I know there's a precise number. Wikipedia has a precise number. I just don't know what the precise. It's not revealed what the precise number is here though. And it's also told that one of the reasons he didn't change it was because there were so many with his name, but also because it's had everything else taken from him. He's not going to let his name be taken from him as well. And it's small things like this in this chapter that tell us a bit more about Jax. But he also contemplates. It also thinks a bit more about what happens at the Coruscant Arms with that voice. Trying to find a bit in the book. We told about how he had gotten really close to actually giving in to the voice, and he wasn't quite sure why he didn't. And he wonders if it would even matter if he just did keep on going, because it was, he's lost so much. He's only known a specific way of life, and he won't be able to lead that. And it goes on, and it starts going on about how the Force, how everything eventually will come to an end, and he wonders if the Force will outlast even that. And the chapter goes on a bit. There was some interesting stuff with Jax. It does go on a bit, and it's just it doesn't need to be dragged out. Again, I think that's just been my main problem with the book so far. There's just so many moments where it just doesn't have a lot of speed going on. It's got a very slow pacing. Okay, it's not long. I don't think it's bad to have slow pacing here and there. It's just about 3/4 of the book I've read so far, and this is still in like the early stages, have been quite slow. They have been quite slow, and it has been a bit of a struggle to try and get through the book at times, just because of how slow it's been. And I think if they just if they just got more to the point rather than, dragging it all out, I think this book probably would help speed things up and make them feel again a bit more tolerable. But that's just my opinion. Again, I did enjoy the chapter. I mainly enjoyed the bit with Kaird. Luckily, again, it seems to be getting back more into the plot, hopefully. I hope we do. Next chapter. So, yeah. But that again, I don't really have much else to say that I haven't already said, so I'm just probably going to end the review here. So, also, I think another reason why I was struggling with this review is that I don't really have a whole lot to say, and I was also struggling to remember what was going on with the Jax Pavin bit, so, yeah. Sorry. But yeah, I think I'm also struggling to remember the beats of the Jax Pavin stuff in this chapter, just because, again, the book drags on. It just drags on. And it can get a bit... It can just... It can be a bit of a struggle to read at times. But anyway. I'll see you... yeah, I'll end the review here, because again, I don't have much else to say. Again, it's nice to learn a little bit more about Jax. I say I'm going to end the review and I keep talking. Again, it's nice to learn a little bit more about Jax, Harry, and how the conflict he's feeling. I think it's just, again, I think my main problem with a lot of the characters in the book at the moment is that we've got a lot of characters. We don't know a lot about them. We know more about their history than we do them as people. And for some of them, their history ties into who they are, like Kaird. And so learning about their history and learning about their motives, we learn quite a bit about who they are. But then there's other characters like Jax, where we don't necessarily know a lot about their history. We've been told a bit about their history. We haven't found out a lot about who they are as people. And I think that's another reason why I'm struggling with this. We're getting into what feels like something that we should be learning quite a bit after figuring out who these characters are. With Jax, we're going more into his mind here, how his thought process is going, but we haven't really learned who he is as a person yet. And we're seeing his conflict, but I suppose in a way we don't have a reference point to see what's normal for him. I think that's the best way I can put it. Where there is no conflict. And I think that's maybe a bit of the reason I'm struggling. I think as the book goes on and we understand, as the series goes on, we start to understand Jax's character more, I think it will start to become a bit more easier. I think Jax's character and a couple other characters as well will become a bit more easier to just understand and, go with the flow with. But I think with, again, just Jax at the moment is a bit of a struggle to just read, and I think it mainly just is. We're going straight into the deep end without really learning who he is as a person. And I think that's probably my main problem with Jax in the book at the moment. We haven't really spent much time figuring out, who he is as a person. I think we probably would have been better if Chapter 4 just kind of showed us a day in his life. Show us have a conversation with someone that kind of shows just, general stuff about him. What's his sense of humour? What's his hobbies? What does he like? You can still go into the hardships of him being a Jedi survivor, but you'll also be able to show us, who he is as a person. Because for the most part, we have gone into, his history and what he's been up to since Order 66, but that doesn't necessarily tie as much into his character as it does Kaird. Kaird, he wants to be, his history very much entwines with his motives. He really wants to get home. We learn what his motive is, and that kind of entwines in his history. He was exiled. It's been long enough now that they'll probably welcome him back. He's in a rather tough situation that's not going to let him go there because he got involved with Black Sun in his past. So there's sort of Kaird. I'd say he's a much deeper character than Jax at the moment. He isn't massively deep, but he is a deeper character. And I think it feels like all these characters have something that if they kind of brought all these characters, like every character feels like they have something that the other characters don't. Den and I5 have the personality. They don't necessarily have a deep history, but they don't need to. Kaird has a great history, and we're from the bat told what his motives are. And Jax doesn't really have either of them, and again, it's a bit of a struggle. Tyke's character more so, I think, says more about Vader than Tyke, just because it was, of course, freed from slavery. And I think that says more about Vader than it does Tyke. I feel like Tyke's just here because he is. So yeah, I think we just need a little bit more with Jax. I think once we start learning about who Jax is, he starts bouncing off other characters more. We'll start getting stuff that feels more, for lack of a better word, Jaxy. Something that feels that when we start getting an understanding of his character, I think I'll be able to kind of tolerate his chapters a bit more. But for now, we don't really know a whole lot about his character, and it is a bit of a struggle to kind of tolerate his chapters at the moment, just because we've been thrown straight into the deep end with his character. we're looking at his struggles, but we don't know who he is as just a normal person, you know. We're being told more about, you know, what he's about his life more than who he is. You know, we've been told that he feels very young Jedi. And that's the best way I can put it. He feels very typical young Jedi. He's struggling with the dark, well, young Jedi protagonist. That's the best way to put it. Struggling with the dark side. Um, very trying to adhere to the Jedi way, etc. You know, that's the best way I can put Jax at the moment. But this chapter did start to kind of give a bit more nuance to him in the sense of, you know, he's questioning the Jedi belief of, you know, what happens after death. You know, he's wonders about whether becoming one with the Force is any better than just, you know, coming to an end. Everything just, and your consciousness just stopping. Hold on, I'm going to put the book back on the shelf and I'll continue. Okay, there we go. But, you know, he's questioning the Jedi beliefs. Again, we're seeing his struggles with the dark side, how he had almost, you know, driven himself to basically just letting himself get killed, and he has, you know, considered suicide, if I'm remembering correctly in the chapter. And now he has a purpose to complete that quest. But we still don't know a whole lot about his character. I can't really tell you is he a bit humorous? Is he rather calm? I can't really tell you. Even in his first appearance in chapter 4, I couldn't really tell you much about what his character is like, aside from that, you know, he adhered to the Jedi way. He didn't kill the thug. He didn't kill the two bully boys, but he knew he should have. And that's about it, character-wise. And he knew he had to get out of there. And he finally, you know, got that strength of mind to know that he has to get out of Coruscant now. It's getting too dangerous. But again, I can't tell you much about who he is. Compare that to like Den and I5, you know, they've got a great dynamic. And I can tell you who they are, I can tell you who Kaird is and what they all are about. I can't really tell you much about Jax. And I think that's a big problem, because Jax is the main character of this book series. If I'm correct. So I'm fairly sure he is. I think he definitely is, actually. I don't know why I said I think. But you know, he's the main character, and I know more about the villains and the side characters than I do our main character, which again, a little bit problematic. And keep in mind, the only character I read so far in the book that I've really know anything, because I do know, you know, I5, Zender, Phaser, obviously. I think Kaird as well. They have all appeared in other books before Coruscant Nights. But I haven't gone through those books, so this is my first introduction to, you know, a lot of these characters. Of course, I know Vader is in the movies. I've seen the movies. Of course, I know about Nick Ross too. I read Shadows of Mindor earlier this year. I'm of course aware of Evan Peel. I just haven't really gone through any of his stories. So a lot of these characters I'm aware of. No, say a lot. A few of these characters I'm aware of, but most of them I haven't gone through their stories before. Den and I5 not gone through their stories before. Kaird's not gone through his stories before. So this is my main first introduction to a lot of these characters. And I know this is Jax Pavan's first appearance in Star Wars. I know he was mentioned in a couple other places, but this is his first proper appearance. And I know more about these other characters who have appeared in other things, but I haven't seen those things, and I know more about them here than I do Jax when this is meant to be his first appearance in anything. So it is a bit we just need to know more about Jax. Hopefully next chapter may give that, because it did start with, as always, he didn't find her, she found him, and it's Lux and Jackson's the featuring character in that chapter. So we may start to see a bit more of a dynamic coming on. You know, with Nick, you know, as well with Nick, you know, it has quite a good dynamic there with Nick, in chapters 9 and 10, you know. He made up gossip, and, you know, it seems to have either a little bit of humour or just caution, you know, it's a little bit hard to tell on paper, but, you know, we've got a little bit of a dynamic there, and got to see a little bit of his character, but we didn't really get to see a lot, so hopefully we start to see more, because for the most part, Jax has really just kind of been either in a professional setting when he's talking to other people, or we've only seen snippets of who he is when he's talking to other people, so for the most part, we've just been in his mind, which, you know, that's good. We're learning more about who he is. I mean, learning more bits about him, but we don't know who he is as a person, which, in that case, it feels just a bit been thrown into the deep end and just don't know enough about the character to, I think, for the deeper bits to really work at the moment. Like they are working, but it would work so much better if we knew who Jax was. I think that's just been my main problem with Jax in the book at the moment. Again, hoping he'll get a lot better as we go on. But yeah, anyway, I don't really have anything else to say. This is 23 minutes long. I think I said I'd end it like even before the 10-minute mark on this review, but yeah. But yeah, I'll end it here. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye.